Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the Lost Sub V2 shortboard. Actually, that doesn't sound right. No, let me look at the tail. Oh, it's not the Lost Sub V2 shortboard. It's the Lost V2 grinder, which is the exact same thing as if it was called the Lost Sub V2 shortboard. So if you think about Lost lineage of shortboards, you have the driver and the sub driver. You have the scorcher and the sub scorcher, and you have the beach buggy, and now there's a sub buggy. If you were to make a sub V2 shortboard, this is it. But instead of calling it the sub V2 shortboard, which is kind of a mouthful, they called it the V2 grinder. So I think going through that explanation clears up a lot of questions like, oh, what is that board? What is the grinder? The grinder is a step down board for the V2 shortboard. When you're looking at making a board specifically for stepping down into smaller, flatter face waves, what you're going to see is you're going to see shorter boards with wider noses, wider tails, more tail block, meaning like the measurement across here is wider, from my fingers one to another is wider. A lot of times also you'll see a little bit fuller rail and you'll see a little bit flatter rocker. You don't have to do any of those things dramatically. If you do them all a little bit, then you still end up with a board that feels similar to and familiar to the board that's above it in your quiver. But when you go to it, you get all of those little extra things add up, equal a lot more power and a lot more speed and projection in surf that's not giving you that power and speed. So this board is the step down for the V2 shortboard. And a lot of people think the V2 shortboard, especially if you got it in domesticated dimensions, well, that board is a board that you can ride in really small waves. And you can ride it in really small waves, but it wasn't specifically meant for really small waves. And even in the domesticated dims, it could get kind of confusing if you're talking about a 19 3/4 inch wide or a 20 inch wide shortboard. Why doesn't that board work in small surf as well as that mid-width would think that would kind of indicate that it's going to work? And the reason is basically the tail area. What you have. If you think about the original V2 shortboard, which still continues in the line and still the best-selling shortboard in the line, when you come into the back, it's actually pretty drawn in. It has almost like a rounded squash, and it kind of comes into here and then across. So you really don't have this wide tail block like what you have on the grinder. Also, it has a more tapered rail, and it also has a little bit narrower nose. Obviously, the V2 shortboard is wider than a lot of the full-on needle noses, but this board, what it does is it packs similar volume into a shorter length, but it also gives you the benefits of just having everything be tweaked just a little bit. So typically, you can ride this board. If you ride it at the same length as your V2 shortboard, it's going to have more volume. If you ride it down from your V2 shortboard, it's going to have the same amount of volume, but fit in a more compact part of the wave, and then have this big gas pedal to drive off this bigger, wider tail. The V2 shortboard is a great board as a single board if you live in a place with good, consistent waves and like that style of board with a flatter entry rocker and then accelerated tail kick. This board is a great single board if you just live in average, everyday junk waves or junk to average waves and you're looking for one board. This is going to be your board that's going to fit in there. And then when you're looking for a board for the good to great scale, then you're going to put the V2 shortboard above it. It's a V2 grinder. Lost describes this board as a mashup between the sub scorcher outline and then the V2 shortboard rocker. So when you're paddling on it, it paddles very easily across the water, paddles into waves really easily. But that shorter, curvier outline with that wider tail block and that bigger exit off the back of the board, it just gives you more horsepower under your feet, the ability to generate speed in softer conditions. It's a V2 grinder. It's a new board this year for Lost, and with that name, a lot of people out of the block super confused. So we hope this explanation of this board does it justice. We've already had a 6.0 in the quiver since December of this year, so about 4 months already. A lot of surfs on it, and the thing's been performing great. And having had standard V2 shortboards and then going to this board, you could definitely feel that additional performance, especially on the bottom end of the board. It's the V2 grinder, aka the Lost Sub V2 shortboard. Check it out. We've got the written review right below this video at realwatersports.com/surfing, or you can call us at the shop. Thanks for tuning in.